So we're now on to a final presentation before we have our first coffee break of the day. We're going to be joined by Steph Hemmings, Head of Digital Marketing Operations at Kimberly-Clark. So give a warm welcome to Steph up onto the stage. That would be really appreciated. Thank you.
So I'm not entirely sure how I'm going to follow killer robots, but we'll give it a good go. So I'm conscious that I'm in between you guys and the break, so you'll be pleased to know that I'm going to tell you a few stories today and show you a few pictures. But to kick it off, so my name's Steph. I work at Kimberly-Clark as Head of Digital Marketing Operations. For those that aren't familiar with KC, which is what we call Kimberly-Clark internally, we're an FMCG. The brands you'll know are Andrex. If we say the puppy, tends people to pick that up straight away. Kleenex, Huggies, and we have Kotex and lots of other products as well. So KC has been on a digital transfer journey for many years. I joined the business about 4 years ago after kind of a background in working at numerous different organisations, online retailers, travel companies, etc. And I joined the business to help look at our websites, so what the role of our websites were, especially as a kind of FMCG, what we did with search, social, etc. And then about 1.5 years ago, I moved into the marketing operations space. But before we get into that, I want to talk to you a little bit about me. So I'm going to be talking to you about the power of people and process. So we're going to start off with a little bit about people. So there are 2 things. If you speak to me, within 5 minutes, you're going to know 2 things about me very quickly. The first one is I'm animal obsessed. So I've got 2 cats. One of them is up here, the ginger one, Randall. And I've got an elderly Staffordshire Bull Terrier called Monty. He's 15 and a half. And you do hear him snoring in the background of my Teams calls. To the point where they get recorded and people send me lols when they're watching it back. The second thing you'll know about me quite quickly is that I am... One of my team members has actually called me a self-confessed super geek, which I took as a compliment. But I'm obsessed with board games and escape rooms. So my idea of a good time, so standard geek, is Friday night with my friends playing some sort of board game. Now, I'm going to tell you a story. This is relevant, so bear with me. But I absolutely despise reading the rules of board games. I hate it. I think we were talking about documents earlier. I hate the leaflets you have to read through. And it's actually a real barrier for me. So I try to go, people will buy me board games. I've got them from Christmas time. And they're literally just sat on the shelf. And my boyfriend's like, are we going to go and play it? And I'm like, I just can't do it. I can't get my head around it. So it really blocks my enjoyment to discover new experiences. But something that's revolutionised my world recently is where I live in Surrey, I've just discovered a board game cafe, and I know you guys have them here in London. But this particular board game cafe, when I go there with my friends, we sit around at a table, they say, what do you want to play? And we'll say an engine game or whatever. And they'll go away, they'll find a game for you, and they'll come back and they'll play it with you. So they'll sit there, they'll talk you through the rules, they'll talk you through the kind of how to play it, what's going on with it, etc. And then what they'll do is they'll stay with you until such time that they think that your team that you're with is comfortable playing that game, and then they'll disappear. But they don't disappear forever. There's always I think this rule means X, Y, Z. So what happens is you then put your hand up, they come back, they explain the rule to you again, and then they disappear off again. But what that's done is it's really, for me, removed the barrier that I'm experiencing when it's coming to play a new board game, and that's because I'm a very visual. I learn visually or by doing. I am not a pamphlet reader. Some of my friends are. They love it. They sit there with the pamphlet and quoting the rules at me. But for me, it doesn't particularly work. So the reason I've told you that is because it kind of links into the role if we think about marketing operations within Kimberly-Clark. So MarkOps is designed. It sits in between, I'd say, our IT team, which we call DTS. So if you hear me say that, apologies, that's IT. DTS, and our business team, so our markets. So the MarkOps role sits at a regional level, and we're there designed really to support our markets. And what we're designed to do is help remove barriers and look at efficiencies within teams, specifically looking at people and process and how we can do one of these 3 things that you can see on the screen. So how do we help our markets move quicker and execute at speed? How do we help them save money? Or how do we make sure there's the right operating model in there for a piece of future technology? So the projects that we pick up sit within those 3 areas, but what I wanted to kind of go through with you guys today is some things that I've been noticing throughout my career and also as I've been with KC kind of on our digital journey. And one of them is that there is a symbiotic relationship, and we've spoken about it already this morning, around technology, the people involved, and the process involved to enable that technology. And these three elements sit together, and they sit together as an ecosystem or as a symbiotic relationship. But what we do tend to do as marketeers is we focus quite heavily on the tech side. And that's usually because someone's promised the world to you, and I think it's David was saying about APIs, completely agree, trying to get things put in when someone's promised something. But you come in, you get the technology, it can automate, it can do this, it can do that. But if you just put the technology in and you don't look at the way you're managing it with your people and the processes to enable that technology, then it can actually fail, or it can just be really, really inefficient. And I'll give you some examples of that later. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through 4 key lessons that I've learned to increase efficiency. And the first one I'm going to talk around is partnering. So when I put this in, I kind of put partnering in, and I was like, well, I kind of know what that means. But I was thinking, well, what actually does that mean when I'm explaining it? And for me, this is a couple of key things. So with digital transformation, your stakeholders are quite varied, they're quite vast. So you could be talking to someone in IT, or you could be talking to someone in supply chain or marketing. And so there's lots of different people with lots of different skill sets and lots of different learning patterns within that. So it's really important when you think about a team that you're not just working as a team but kind of in silo, but you're working as partners. And to be able to do that, you need to understand your North Star and what your ambition is, where you're going, what your goals are, the RACI in that, what role do you all have to play in that, and then how does that all come together in order for you to be able to move forward. And one example of this that I think works really well at KC, and KC is a company that I think is quite unique because the partnering there is very strong, and that's with our IT team, so what we call DTS. So I have 2 DTS business partners across EMEA, and I must speak to them. I think they've been pinging me this morning. I literally speak to them probably 4 or 5 times a day for various different things. And we really do work as a partnership and as a union. And what happens is we will go into a conversation with maybe our global team or our local markets, and we do move as a bit of a pack. So we'll go in and you'll have the DTS vision and the side, so they'll talk about the technology, and then you'll have my team or me talking about the business side and how the two marry together. And when you do that, you get it's a lot more efficient, there's a lot more speed, and it means that you're actually a lot more convincing to the people that you're trying to get on board when you're kind of talking through projects and processes. So partnering for me, really important, can't be underestimated. And you can take those theories to really kind of any department you're working with, as long as you understand your role, where you're headed, where you're going, and what effect you have within the projects. So the next one, which is quite close to my heart, and I think Charlie mentioned this in your presentation, we need to create environments with our teams or with our people that it's okay to fail. Now, we talk about that a lot within the industry. It's okay to fail, fail fast, red is gold, all of this sort of stuff, which is true and is great, but you have to eat, live, breathe it. So with teams, for me, if a team something's broken, doesn't necessarily need to fail, but it's broken, it's not working, or you've tried something and it's failed, the important thing is how do you learn from that? So how do you pick that up and move forward, and what behaviours are you taking that from? How are you picking that up as a team, with the partners within your teams, and really saying, okay, we've learned X, Y, Z, we're going to change A, B, C in order to make sure that doesn't happen again. And that learning behaviour is more important to me, within reason, obviously, depending on what it is, more important than the actual failure that's happened. It's how do you pick it up and how do you learn? I think the other thing in this space is, when you're an SME or a subject matter expert, I think there's a pressure to feel like you should know everything, and you're not going to. So I think it's important that you say to your teams that it's okay to say, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. And if you think about digital, it's in a constant state of flux. Google's always launching an algorithm. We were talking about Gen AI earlier. AI is the new thing. There's always something new coming out and something changing. So whilst you may be an SME, you're never going to know everything. So it's actually quite empowering for teams if you can say to them, it's okay to fail and it's okay to say, I don't know. But I will go away and I will find someone that can help me, or I will seek out the information. And bringing that all together really kind of starts to build trust as well with the teams that you're working with, and transparency, which we'll talk a bit about. So the third one for me is community. So if you've sorted your partnership, so you've got a really good partnership that you're working with your teams, you've said, okay, we've got a structure and a culture that it's okay to fail, how are you learning from that, it's okay to say no, then naturally what will start to form is a community. And within that community space, that means that what the teams are going to do is they're actually going to start to think more innovatively around how they can get around obstacles and subjects. The other thing with communities is it's not just your direct team, but what we've done within KC is we create champions within different departments. So KC is a very lean organisation. So what we've done is we've gone in and said, okay, well, if there's data or digital asset management or whatever it is, we're going to create champions around there, and they're going to act as an extension of our team, and they're going to build and create a community. And what they do is that community sits and they start to talk to each other, they start to grow, they start to innovate, and then really, like a snowball, it starts to grow, and we need very little kind of pushing from you as the SME or as the person that's put that together. So communities are really, really important, and yeah, it's been one of the kind of good success measures within KC. So the last one before we got on a few examples. Now this is my favourite, which is ironic because I don't like reading rules, but I do like documenting. So it's a bit sad, but I do really like it. So I love documenting things, and that's partly because I like fixing processes, as you probably guessed, with board games and things like that, and escape rooms and getting out of stuff like that. But it's really, really important that we document. So I've gone into a lot of businesses and I've sat there and I've said, okay, if we win the lottery and we all don't come in tomorrow, can this function without us? Can it function on a base MVP level that things aren't going to fall apart if the team isn't in for whatever reason? And a lot of the answer is no. If someone leaves the business, things get lost, it's in OneDrives, no one knows where anything is. So what we've done is said, okay, we need to make sure that we are documenting our processes and we're thinking about the way people engage. So if we think about the board game example earlier, I do not do well. If you give me a big document, I am not going to do well with that. I will try, but I really struggle. But if you give me a combination of training, videos, and a document, that works well for me. So it's a case of how do people engage, how do we document not just in a physical like Word document, but how do we also think about the videos we're creating? You know, does it need to be, I don't know, intranets, whatever your resources are available to you. But it's really important that we do document so that if we've got all the other elements in place with our people, that our processes and our guidelines are clear, because that is what the teams and the marketeers that I'm working with require. So they want guardrails. It is important, though, that you create agility within that. So again, we spoke earlier this morning about not putting too much red tape and, you know, tangling yourself up, like raising tickets left, right, and centre, for example, to do various bits and pieces. You need to be able to say, okay, I get that there's a process and a guideline, but how do we flex with that depending on what the business needs at that particular time? And I'll talk a little bit about that, actually. It's a good segue. Next. It's like I thought it through. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some examples within KC, things that have worked really well, and things that have, one thing that's potentially failed. Well, I'd say it has failed. It's a challenge. So one of the things that's worked well within the business is our web editing service. So within marketing operations, we put a business case together and we said, okay, over the last 3 years, we've just launched lots of new websites on a system called Sitecore. We rolled out lots of new websites, but what we were seeing was that there were no clear, there were kind of guidelines and a bit of training, but there was no clear guidance or training for the markets on how you update the site. So we're saying, okay, well, once you deploy that technology in, that is actually the day one. It's not day one at the time you're implementing it. Day one is actually when that tech is in the business and consumer facing and kind of moving forward. So how do we need to make sure that that is working. So what we did is said, okay, we're going to analyse exactly how everyone's editing the site. We're going to get all the feedback from the markets and say, you know, what is it you're struggling with? What are you, what can you not do? And we were getting lots of feedback saying it was blocked. People were trying to get into the CMS system. They didn't know how to do it. We had agencies going into the system as well. They didn't know how to do it. So what we did was we said, okay, well, let's go back to the beginning. We're going to put a specialist web editor into the business. They're going to be a Sitecore expert. But what we're going to do is really think about the people and process around it. So the technology already exists. This is an example of just focusing on the people and process. So we made sure that we, even from hiring, that we the people that we were hiring had the right skill sets. And also, we documented a very clear playbook on end-to-end on everything from what is a web editor all the way through to what are your SLAs if you raise a ticket into the system, and what is our promise to get back to you within the tool. We also created a community space, so we have a team space where people can go on and they can ask live questions, so to the web editor or to one of the other community members. So it's a bit like a wiki. If you get stuck, if you want to edit things yourself, then you can ask a question, or the web editor will come on and say, don't worry, I can pick that up for you and I will solve that problem. And what we found is that we have 3 measurements for this to see how this was successful. The first one was running a Net Promoter Score. So we send a survey out to the business every month to say, okay, how do you think we're performing? And it's anonymous deliberately, so people can be very, very honest. And then we measure each month exactly how the feedback and the comments that come through. And then what we do is we take those comments, we improve the service, and then we push it back to the markets to say, hello, we heard you said, I'll give you an example, we need to put more mobile images, screenshots in our proofs. Okay, so we heard that, we've put that in, and then we go back to market. Just to build that trust to say, we're listening to you, this is what we're hearing. So NPS survey, I'm pleased to say that ranges between an NPS is normally out of 10, so this is out of 5. But it's 4.5 to 5 every month. So it's worked really well, really pleased with it. Also, the editor is able to serve the content changes twice as fast versus our previous model, and it's about 15 to 20% cheaper. So by really thinking about all that pipe work and how that all links together, we've not only been able to unblock something for the business and almost let them enjoy the website, just as you heard from me from the board games, but also make it cheaper and faster for the business too. So that's something that's worked well. However, living what I said earlier, that it's okay to fail, not everything is successful. And this is another project that's quite close to my heart, and I'm sure those marketeers that are in the room, digital asset management is probably something that you're familiar with and the challenges that are involved with it. Oh dear, so how do I describe this? Right, so I describe an asset manager like a library. So if you imagine it's a library and all the content assets are the books on the shelves. Our digital asset manager doesn't have a library, or didn't have a librarian. All the books were on the wrong shelves. So when people were going in, they were trying to find an asset, and there was a section called science fiction that had recipe books on it. But not only that, someone had knocked up a shelf next door that's called sci-fi. So you had sci-fi and science fiction, and all the books were in the wrong places. And the feedback we were getting from the markets is, we really want to use this system, but we just physically can't find what we're looking for within that. And when we broke that down, that was because the guidelines and the people and the process, the guidelines around it, were not clear to the markets. We had them, we had training videos, but they weren't sure how to access them. They wanted, again, if you think about the way people engage, they wanted relevant content. They wanted to speak to somebody to kind of get training. And that was all a bit haphazard. So we had tried to deploy it, but I would say it probably did fail, or it was definitely being challenged on the success of that particular tool. And it wasn't the technology that was the problem. The tech was fine. It was the people and processes around it. So what we're doing as a business now is we're rehauling that. Again, we've seen it work with web editing, so we're now working on the digital asset manager to look at those playbooks, those people, those processes, and what needs to be true in order to make that successful. And the key to that is active listening as well, so really listening to your markets and taking the feedback. So, last couple of slides from me. So some tips and tricks for setting teams up for success. So first one, we've spoken about it a lot this morning, but really creating trust and transparency within your teams, really, really important. It removes that whole he said, she said thing if you have teams that are cross-functionally working and they start to move together as one, and it's a lot more efficient. It is a lot safer environment as well that we've spoken about, so people are more likely to innovate and want to contribute. The second tip for me is pick up the phone. I think a lot of the time we're stuck on emailing or ping people on Teams, pings every 5 minutes. I have to mute all the chats on my Teams. Just phone someone. And when I say phone someone, don't book in a 30-minute call and phone them and speak to them about random stuff. And I am guilty of this because I like to chat. Random stuff about 30 minutes. If you say it's 5 minutes, make it 5 minutes. And again, it's building that trust and transparency. So pick up the phone. Third one is playbook. So Playbooks, basically documents. So within KC, we've implemented these playbooks or these guidelines. They're interactive. They're interactive PowerPoints. That's how we work with them at the moment. But I would say just really think about how that works for you guys and what that means. But we don't just have that document. We have lots of other supporting, engaging ways of getting training as well. And again, that leads me to engage in a relevant way. So really think about people like me that really do struggle with reading rules, and think about different ways that you can engage with your audiences. And so the last thing really for me is, one key takeaway would be, please try and think people and process first. So I'm a massive advocate for this within our business, and the technology is extremely important, but the technology will work even better if we've thought about those two things up front, and potentially not midway through or latter. Yeah, and that's me.